She was a lady of the court, promised to a monster. He was the duke who vanished from her life 5 years ago. Tonight, at the glittering St. James's Palace ball, her life will shatter. To escape a brutal marriage, Lady Genevieve must trade her silk ball gown for a servant's rough-spun dress, her jewels for a smudge of coal dust. She flees into the treacherous London night, only to collide with the one man she never expected to see again. The one man who could save her, or be her ruin. And the most dangerous part? He recognized her instantly. Cobblestones, slick with rain and refuse, bit into the thin soles of the stolen shoes. Lady Genevieve's lungs burned, a sharp, searing pain that matched the raw terror clawing at her throat. The heavy wool of the servant's dress scratched her skin, a torment far removed from the silks and velvets that had been her life. Just an hour ago, she had been curtsying to the king himself, her gloved hand resting lightly on the arm of Lord Harrington, the man who had bought her future. Harrington. The name was bile in her mouth. His cold, assessing eyes had roamed over her, a predator admiring its trapped prey. The king, desperate for Harrington's shipping alliances, had sealed her fate with a jovial clap on the man's back. "The girl is yours, my lord, a fine brood mare for your line." Genevieve had smiled, a perfect, porcelain mask of compliance, while her mind screamed. She had seen the ledgers. Hidden in her father's desk, discovered just days ago, were documents that proved Harrington wasn't just a cruel opportunist. He was a traitor. He was skimming funds from the Crown's coffers, funds meant for the Navy, and lining his own pockets to build a private army. She had tried to show the king's advisor, but the man was in Harrington's pocket. When she was summoned to the king's private study, she thought she'd be heard. Instead, Harrington was there, and the king had announced their betrothal. Harrington's smile, as the king left them, was reptilian. "You are clever, my dear," he'd whispered, his fingers bruising her arm. "But clever girls who poke their noses into men's affairs must be taught. Your wedding night will be a lesson in obedience." That was when she knew. She could not just expose him. She had to escape him. Now, she was just another shadow in the labyrinthine servants' passages of St. James's Palace. She had slipped away from the ballroom during a waltz, her heart hammering against her ribs. She'd found the small chamber where the scullery maid slept, grabbing the rough, grey dress and threadbare shawl from an empty cot. She'd rubbed soot from the hearth onto her high cheekbones, wincing as she scraped her perfect skin. She'd unbound her complex, golden coiffure, letting the hair fall in a tangled, common mess. She was nobody. She was free. Or so she thought, until she burst from a side alley, gasping for breath, and stumbled directly into the path of a towering figure. She fell hard onto the wet stones of the street, the air knocked from her lungs. "Watch where you're going, girl!" a gruff voice snapped. A link boy's torch illuminated the man, a brawny carriage driver. Behind him, the carriage itself was the very picture of aristocratic wealth. Black lacquer, polished to a mirror finish, with a ducal crest embossed on the door. It was stopped, its path blocked by her sudden appearance. Genevieve scrambled to her knees, crab-walking backward, her eyes wide with panic. "Forgive me, sir, I meant no harm." The carriage door opened. A man stepped out, his movements fluid and impatient. He was tall, impossibly elegant, even in the gloom. The light from a nearby gas lamp caught the sharp line of his jaw and the rich, dark blue of his tailored coat. He was the epitome of Mayfair, a world away from the filth of the gutter she was kneeling in. "Thomas, what is the delay?" His voice. "Jean." Genevieve froze. That voice. It was deeper, rougher with authority than she remembered, but it was unmistakable. It was the voice that had haunted her dreams for 5 long years. The voice of the boy who had promised her forever in the Kensington Palace gardens before her father's disgrace and his own elevation to a title. She kept her head down, her soot-stained hair falling like a curtain, praying he would dismiss her as just another piece of city refuse. He took a step toward her. She could see the shine on his black Hessian boots. "Get up, girl, and be on your way. You are blocking my—" He stopped. The silence that fell was more terrifying than the din of the London night. She could feel his gaze on her, sharp and analytical. He wasn't looking at her dress. He was looking at her. She chanced to look up, just a flicker, through her tangled hair. His face was a mask of cold, aristocratic indifference, but his eyes were a piercing grey, and they were fixed on her with a sudden, shocking intensity. He looked as if he'd seen a ghost. "Get in the carriage," he said, his voice flat. "I beg your pardon, sir," she whispered, her voice trembling. He reached down, and his hand, strong and gloved, clamped around her upper arm. It was not gentle. He hauled her to her feet as if she weighed nothing. The sudden proximity, the scent of his cologne, sandalwood and expensive tobacco, rocketed her back in time. "I said," he repeated, his voice dangerously low, his grey eyes searching her face, sweeping past the soot and grime as if it weren't there. "Get in the carriage." The link boy held the torch higher, and the light fell fully on her face, a sharp, indrawn breath. He hadn't just seen a girl. "My God," he whispered, the sound stolen by the wind. "Genevieve." She ripped her arm from his grasp, a sob of pure despair tearing from her throat, and she ran. But she didn't get 2 steps before he caught her again, his grip this time unbreakable. He didn't say another word. He simply bundled her, kicking and struggling, into the opulent darkness of his carriage, slammed the door, and shouted to his driver, "Hobbs, drive, now!" The carriage lurched forward, throwing her onto the plush velvet seat. Across from her, a dark, imposing silhouette, sat Arthur, the Duke of Ashworth. And he was staring at her, as if he'd found the very thing he'd been looking for, or the very thing he'd been trying to forget. The carriage was a cage of suffocating luxury. After the cold, raw night, the interior was warm, smelling faintly of leather and his sandalwood cologne. Genevieve pressed herself into the corner, as far from him as she could get, tucking the stolen, rough-soled shoes beneath the hem of her scratchy dress. She was trembling, part from cold, part from the adrenaline of her escape, and part from the sheer, terrifying impossibility of her rescuer. Arthur, Duke of Ashworth, the man who had held her heart, and then, in her darkest hour, had vanished. He said nothing for several long minutes. The carriage rumbled over the cobblestones, the rhythmic sound amplifying the heavy silence between them. She kept her face turned to the window, watching the dark, unfamiliar streets of London blur past, though she saw nothing. All she could feel was the weight of his stare. "You have 5 years of silence, Genevieve," he finally said. His voice was no longer shocked. It was cold, hard, and edged with something she couldn't name. "And you choose to break it by appearing in Cheapside, dressed as a scullery maid. You always did have a flair for the dramatic." His words were a slap. She turned from the window, her terror hardening into a familiar, defensive anger. "And you, Arthur, always had a flair for judging things you do not understand. Now stop this carriage, let me out." "Let you out?" He gave a short, humourless laugh. "Let you out into that? To be snatched by cut-purses or worse within the hour? You may have forgotten your station, but I have not. You will tell me what is happening." "I will tell you nothing," she spat. "You have no right to ask. You forfeited that right when you abandoned me, when you left me to face the vipers at court alone after my father." She choked on the word. The pain of it, her father's treason, his execution, the loss of their lands, their name, was still as sharp as it was 5 years ago. Arthur's expression darkened. The flicker of the carriage lamps cast shadows across his face, making him look more like a marble statue than the warm, laughing boy she remembered. "I abandoned no one. I was sent to the continent by my father. By the time I returned, a duke in my own right, your father was gone, and you were a ward of the crown, locked away in St. James's. You refused my letters." "Letters?" she cried, her voice cracking. "I received no letters." Only silence. Only the whispers that the new Duke of Ashworth was too busy, too important, to concern himself with the traitor's daughter. He leaned forward, the intensity of his gaze pinning her. "I wrote," he said, his voice a low, fierce growl. "Every week for 6 months. I wrote to you. I wrote to the king. I petitioned for a meeting. I was told, in no uncertain terms by the king's own private secretary, that you wished no contact, that you had found new protectors." The words hung in the air, heavy with accusation. Genevieve stared at him, the new information warring with her long-held new. "New protectors? I don't understand. I received nothing. I was told you were content." "Content," he scoffed. The carriage slowed, turning sharply and passing through a set of high wrought-iron gates. They were in Mayfair. Moments later, it stopped beneath the portico of a massive, imposing townhouse. Ashworth House. "We are here," he said, his tone clipped and all business. "Here. Where is here? You cannot keep me." "I can," he said, "and I will, until you tell me who you are running from, and why. I may not be the boy you remember, Lady Genevieve, but I am not a man who will stand by and watch you destroy yourself." Before she could protest further, the door was opened by a stern-looking butler, who did not so much as blink at the sight of his master with a woman who looked like a soot-stained chimney sweep. "Your Grace," the butler, Hobbs, said, his voice a smooth baritone. "Hobbs. Ready the blue guest chamber. Have Mrs. Davies send up hot water and a meal, and find some suitable clothing. My cousin has had a trying evening." "Cousin?" Genevieve hissed, as he practically lifted her from the carriage. "It will stop the servants from gossiping. Now walk," he commanded, his hand firmly on her back, guiding her into the black and white marble entryway. The house was silent, dark and cold, mirroring its master. He led her up the grand, sweeping staircase, down a long hall, and into a beautifully appointed room. A fire was already crackling in the hearth, clearly lit on his orders. "You will stay here," he said, standing at the door, blocking her only exit. "There is a lock. It will be bolted from the outside. Do not try to leave." "You are making me a prisoner?" she asked, her voice trembling again, but this time with fury. "I am keeping you safe," he corrected. "Safe from whatever, or whoever, made you flee the palace looking like that. Now, who is he, Genevieve?" "I don't know what you mean. Don't lie to me." He stepped into the room, and for the first time, she felt physically afraid of him. He was bigger than she remembered, broader. A man. "I recognized you, didn't I? After 5 years in the dark, covered in filth. I saw you. You think he won't? Here. The man you are running from. The man who is, even now, tearing the palace apart, looking for you. The man the king sent me a summons about, not 3 hours ago. Lord Harrington." Genevieve's blood ran cold. "You spoke to the king?" "I was at the palace. I saw you at the ball," he said, his voice dropping. "I saw you with him. I saw the look on your face. And I saw him, looking at you. You are a fool if you think a servant's dress will stop a man like that." He knew. He had seen it all. "He is a monster," she whispered, the fight draining out of her, replaced by bone-deep exhaustion. Arthur's face softened. "Just a fraction." "I know. Now, tell me everything. And this time, do not leave anything out. Your life may very well depend on it." Genevieve slept a sleep that was more like a collapse. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through a gap in the heavy, sapphire-blue curtains. For a confused moment, she thought she was back in her chambers at St. James's. Then, the events of the night came crashing back. Harrington's leering face, the scratch of the wool dress, the cold fury in Arthur's eyes. She sat up. The servant's dress was gone. In its place, she was wearing a fine linen nightgown, ludicrously large for her frame. Someone, a maid presumably, while she was dead to the world, had cleaned the soot from her face and hands and washed her hair. It hung, damp and clean, over her shoulders. On a chair by the fire, a simple but elegant day dress of dove-grey muslin was laid out, along with soft leather slippers and a set of clean underthings. She was a prisoner, yes, but a very well cared-for one. After dressing, she tested the door. As he'd promised, it was locked. A wave of panic and frustration washed over her. She was trading one cage for another, one keeper for another. She paced the room. It was beautiful, furnished with exquisite taste. French antiques, a small writing desk, and shelves of leather-bound books. But the windows overlooked a small, high-walled private garden. There was no escape. Hours passed. A maid she had not seen, a silent girl with a blank face, brought her a breakfast tray and left without a word. The silence of the house was more unnerving than the chaos of the palace. Finally, just after midday, the key turned in the lock. Arthur entered. He was dressed not for town, but in a simple white shirt, open at the collar, and dark riding breeches. He looked less like the formidable Duke and more like the man she'd known. He carried a small, leather-bound book. "You are clean," he observed, his grey eyes sweeping over her. "That is a start." "Let me go, Arthur," she said, her voice flat. "This is not your concern." "You made it my concern when you fell in front of my carriage," he countered, walking to the window. "I have been out. The city is agitated." "What do you mean?" "I mean Lord Harrington is not taking your disappearance well. He has convinced the king you have been abducted. There are guards at every city gate. He's offering a reward. Every cutthroat and bounty hunter from Whitehall to Wapping will be looking for a high-born lady with golden hair." Genevieve sank onto the small settee. "He's not looking for me. He's looking for what I took." Arthur turned from the window, his attention suddenly sharp. "Took? You stole from him?" She hesitated. She had told him about Harrington, but not the why. She hadn't mentioned the treason, the ledgers. "Genevieve," he warned, his voice low, "do not play games with me. What did you take?" "I have no proof," she whispered, her hands twisting in the muslin of her dress. "Not on my person." "What proof? Proof of what?" She took a deep breath. She had to trust him. She was trapped, and he was, for all his coldness, the only person who had ever known the real her. "Harrington is a traitor. He's been diverting funds from the royal shipyards. My father—" She paused, the admission tasting like ash. "My father was the king's accountant. He was a meticulous man. He kept private ledgers. When he died, his effects were seized. But I knew where he kept his true private records, a hidden compartment in his study desk, which was moved to my chambers. And Harrington knew this? He suspected. He knew my father was too honest. I think he framed my father to get his position, to cover his own tracks. And when the king offered me to him, he thought he would gain a wife and silence a threat all at once. He told me he intended to search my chambers after our wedding. Arthur's face was grim. So you found the proof? I did. A small black ledger. It details every transaction, every bribe, every stolen shilling. It proves my father's innocence and Harrington's guilt. Where is it? He demanded. When I fled, I couldn't bring it. I hid it. Back at the palace. Arthur swore, a short, violent word that shocked her. He ran a hand through his dark hair. At the palace. Of course. The one place in England you cannot go. He will have torn your rooms apart by now. No, Genevieve said, a small, desperate hope rising. He won't find it. Not where I put it. It's safe. For now. This changes everything, Arthur murmured, more to himself than to her. This is not just a spurned bride. This is treason. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw the true weight of the dukedom on his shoulders. You have put me in an impossible position. I put you in a position? She cried, a bubble of hysterical laughter rising. I am the one locked in this room. You are, he roared, slamming his hand on the mantelpiece, making her jump. You are in this room, while he is out there. He has the king's ear. He is whispering poison, suggesting you were in league with your traitor father, that your abduction is a ruse. Then let me go. I will disappear. I will go to America. I will not bring this to your door. You already have, he said, his voice quiet again. He walked to her, stopping just inches away. She had to tilt her head back to look at him, to meet his intense, silver-eyed gaze. Why? She whispered, the anger gone, replaced by a desperate need to understand. Why did you stop? Why not just drive on? You despise me. You think I betrayed you. He didn't answer for a long moment. He reached out, his fingers hovering just over her cheek where the soot had been. She saw his thumb move, as if brushing away a phantom stain. Despise you? He said, his voice rough. No, Genevieve. I could never despise you. I was angry, hurt, but I never stopped. He cut himself off, pulling his hand back as if he'd been burned. He stepped away, his ducal mask slamming back into place. It doesn't matter. What matters is the ledger. It is your only hope of clearing your father's name. It is the crown's only hope of stopping a traitor. But how? She asked. It's in the palace, and I am here. Yes, Arthur said, a dangerous, calculating light entering his eyes. Which means we must find a way to get it. And to do that, we must first leave this house. But you said the gates are watched. Harrington is looking for a desperate girl in a servant's dress, Arthur said, a slow, wolfish smile touching his lips. He is not looking for the Duke of Ashworth and his future Duchess. The silence that followed his statement was absolute. Genevieve stared at him, her mind unable to process the words. Future Duchess. Arthur turned, his expression unreadable. It is a practical solution. We are to be married. Married! She shrieked, finding her voice. You lock me in a room, accuse me of betrayal, and now you mean to marry me. Have you gone mad? On the contrary, I am being perfectly rational, he said, moving to the small writing desk. He picked up a quill, testing its nib. Think, Genevieve. Harrington has branded you a runaway, a harlot, perhaps even a conspirator. No one at court will stand for you, but they will not dare to question the Duchess of Ashworth. This is insane. This is a business transaction to you, isn't it? Just like the King's was with Harrington. The quill snapped in his fingers. He threw the broken pieces into the fireplace with a violence that startled her. "Do not," he said, his voice a low, lethal whisper, "ever compare me to him." He spun to face her, his control breaking. "For 5 years, I have lived with the ghost of you. I returned to England to find my father dead, a dukedom I never wanted on my shoulders, and the woman I loved gone, vanished into the king's protection. You say I abandoned you. I say you left me." "I had no choice," she cried, the old wounds tearing open. "My father was executed. Our lands were seized. I was a pariah. What was I to do? Drag the new Duke of Ashworth down with me? The king offered me a place at court as his ward. It was that, or the street. You could have come to me," he shouted. "You could have trusted me. How? Your new life, your title, it was everything. I was nothing. A traitor's daughter. I received no letters, Arthur. I heard only silence, and then the rumors. The Duke of Ashworth, seen with this lady or that. The Duke of Ashworth, restoring his estates. Never. The Duke of Ashworth, fighting for the woman he claimed to love." The raw pain in her voice finally broke through his anger. He looked at her, really looked at her, and the years of bitterness seemed to drain from his face, leaving him looking exhausted. "I did fight," he said quietly, "in my own way. I dug into your father's case." She stilled. "What?" "I never believed he was a traitor. Not your father. He was too meticulous, too honorable. It was sloppy. The evidence was too convenient. I have spent the last 3 years using my resources, my network, trying to find the man who really framed him." This was a revelation. While she had been surviving, nursing her broken heart and wounded pride, he had been working. For her father. "Did you find anything?" she whispered. "I found whispers," he said, his gaze distant. "Whispers that led to shipping interests, to diverted funds, to a man who rose to power far too quickly on the ruins of another's reputation. All paths led to one man, but I had no proof. Only a traitor's daughter would have the key." He looked at her. "The ledger. It confirms everything I suspected." The air between them changed. It was no longer a fight about the past. It was a conspiracy in the present. The two of them, just as it had been in the gardens at Kensington, united against the world. "So," she said, her voice shaking but her resolve hardening, "your proposal. It is a ruse, a way to give me protection, a way for us to move freely." "It is," he confirmed, though his eyes lingered on her, and there was a current of something much more complex beneath the surface. "We will procure a special license from the Archbishop. We can be married by dawn." "So quickly? Harrington is not a patient man. We do not have time. He will grow bolder. He will have my house watched. We must be seen, and we must be seen as unassailable." He stepped closer, his demeanor all business again, but his proximity made her heart ache. "It is a great deal to ask. Your freedom, your name given to me, to a man you believed abandoned you." Genevieve looked down at her hands, the hands of a lady, soft and pale, that had been stained with soot. She had fled one monster, only to find herself in the power of a man she wasn't sure she even knew anymore. But he was offering her not just a name, but a weapon, a shield. And deep in her heart, a secret, treacherous part of her whispered that this was all she had ever wanted. Not the title, not the protection, but him. "It is not a marriage of love," she said, testing the words. His face closed off. "No, it is a marriage of necessity, an alliance, to save your father's reputation and to stop a traitor." "And what happens after?" she asked, unable to stop herself. "When the ledger is found? When Harrington is exposed?" Arthur looked at her for a long, heavy moment. The silence stretched, filled with the ghosts of their past and the uncertainty of their future. "After," he said finally, his voice hoarse. "We shall see. First we must survive the wedding." He offered her his arm. "Come. We must make you look like a future duchess. Hobbs has found my late mother's travelling clothes. They should fit." She placed her hand on his arm. The fabric of his shirt was warm beneath her fingers. It was the first time they had touched in 5 years without anger or force. It felt like a jolt of lightning. "Arthur," she said, stopping him at the door. He looked down at her, his grey eyes questioning. "The letters you sent, the ones I never received. Who was the king's private secretary then?" Arthur's jaw tightened. "A man named Lord Pembroke." "Why?" "He was Lord Harrington's closest friend," Genevieve said, her blood running cold. "He was the one who found the evidence against my father. He was the one who told me you had moved on." The pieces clicked into place, sharp and terrible. It wasn't just Harrington, it was a conspiracy, and they had been caught in its web from the very beginning. "They did not just separate us, Arthur," she whispered, her hand tightening on his arm. "They planned it. They broke us apart to clear the way for their own ambition." His eyes, when they met hers, were no longer cold. They were burning. "Then they will pay for it," he said. "They will pay for every year and for every lie." The pre-dawn light of London was a grim, grey affair. It filtered through the windows of the Duke's study, painting the room in shades of ash. Genevieve stood by the fire, dressed in a travelling suit of deep green velvet. It had belonged to Arthur's mother, and it was, as he'd predicted, a perfect fit, though it felt like wearing the costume of a woman far more powerful than she felt. Hobbs, the impassive butler, had been a whirlwind of quiet efficiency. He had produced the clothes, arranged for a carriage, and, with a single raised eyebrow, accepted his master's shocking directive. Arthur had been gone for 2 hours, 2 agonizing, clock-ticking hours. He had gone alone, on horseback, to see a man about a license, as he'd put it. He had left her with Hobbs and 2 large armed footmen who were now posted, not outside her locked door, but at the front and back entrances of the house. She was no longer a prisoner. She was a charge, a responsibility. It felt, if possible, even more burdensome. She was staring into the flames when the sound of the front door opening, then closing, made her spin around. Arthur strode into the study, his cape damp with morning mist. He looked exhausted, but triumphant. He held a piece of parchment in his hand. "The Archbishop is a man who understands the urgency of a duke," he said, his voice dry. He placed the special license on his desk. "It is done. We can be married in the chapel here at Ashworth House within the hour." Genevieve's stomach twisted. Just like that. A piece of paper, and a life is signed away. He stopped, his hand on the desk, and looked at her. "Not signed away, Genevieve, forged into a weapon." He walked over to the sideboard and poured 2 small glasses of brandy. He handed one to her. "It's 7 in the morning," she protested, though she took the glass. "We have a difficult day ahead. We need the fortitude." He drank his in one swallow, the liquid courage doing nothing to soften the hard lines of his face. "Hobbs is fetching the vicar from St. George's. He thinks it's a romantic elopement. We must endeavour to look the part." "Look the part," she repeated numbly. "Arthur, what if this doesn't work? What if Harrington simply ignores it? He has the king's ear." "He may have the king's ear, but I have his name," Arthur said. "As the Duke of Ashworth, I hold the mortgages on half of Whitehall. The king will listen to me. He must. But first I must have standing. As your husband, I have a right to protect you. I have a right to demand an investigation into your father's affairs." An hour later, they stood in the small, cold, stone chapel tucked into the west wing of the house. It hadn't been used in years. The only witnesses were a visibly nervous Hobbs and a sleepy, disgruntled vicar. Genevieve felt a hysterical bubble of laughter rise in her throat. Her first wedding, the one she'd dreamed of as a girl, was supposed to be in the sunshine, in the gardens at Kensington, with Arthur. Not in a dusty, freezing chapel, with a special license bought in the dead of night in a borrowed dress as part of a treasonous plot. The vicar cleared his throat. "Dearly beloved," Arthur's hand found hers. It was strong and warm, and his grip was possessive. He squeezed it, once, a silent message. "We are in this together." She looked up at him. He was not looking at the vicar. He was looking at her. His grey eyes were unblinking, and in their depths she saw a flicker of the boy he had been, the boy who had promised to slay dragons for her. Perhaps he was. When the time came for her vows, her voice was surprisingly steady. "Aye, Genevieve, take thee, Arthur." When it was over, the vicar, clearly relieved, said, "You may kiss the bride." A terrible, awkward silence fell. This was not part of the plan. This was not a business arrangement. This was intimate. Arthur turned to her. He did not smile. He simply raised his free hand and cupped her jaw, his thumb stroking her cheekbone. It was the same gesture from the night before, but this time there was no hesitation. He leaned in slowly, giving her every chance to turn away. She did not. His lips were firm and cool from the morning air. It was not the passionate kiss of their youth. It was something else entirely. It was a promise, a seal, a brand. It said, "You are mine. You are safe. You are my Duchess." When he pulled back, her lips were tingling, and the chapel suddenly felt much warmer. "Well," he said, his voice a low rumble. "That is that. Hobbs, see the vicar back to St. George's, and ensure his discretion with a suitable donation to the poor box. At once, Your Grace." Hobbs bowed, his face as impassive as ever, though Genevieve thought she saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. "Now," Arthur said, leading her back to the study, "we have a traitor to catch, and to do that, we must re-enter the lion's den." "The palace," she breathed. "We're going back?" "Not just yet. First, we must announce ourselves to the ton. We must make our marriage a fact before Harrington can make your disappearance a crime. Tonight is the Duchess of Richmond's ball. It is the most public stage in London. We will attend." "Tonight? But I have nothing to wear, and him. Harrington will be there." "Exactly," Arthur said, a predatory glint in his eye. "You will be dressed by the finest modiste in London. I sent Hobbs to rouse her hours ago. She will be here shortly. And yes, Harrington will be there. I am counting on it. What do you want me to do? You will do nothing. You will smile. You will hold your head high. You will be polite. You will be the very picture of a radiant new bride. You will be so unassailably happy that any rumor of abduction or coercion will seem ludicrous. I don't know if I can, Arthur. Lie to everyone. To his face. He took her hands in his. Yes, you can. You survived 5 years at court. You survived Harrington. You are the daughter of an earl, and you are now the Duchess of Ashworth. You will be magnificent. Just then, Hobbs entered. Your Grace, he said, correcting himself. Madame Delacroix is here. She has brought the entire shop, it seems. Excellent, Arthur said, releasing her. Go. Become the Duchess." As she turned to leave, he called her name. "Genevieve." She turned back. "The dress," he said, his gaze intense. "Tell her to make it the color of fire. I want you to burn so brightly tonight that he cannot stand to look at you." The ballroom at Richmond House was a sea of glittering diamonds, vibrant silks, and powdered wigs. It was the heart of the London season, and tonight it was a battlefield. When the major domo announced their names, a shocked hush fell over the entire assembly. His Grace, the Duke of Ashworth, and Her Grace, the Duchess of Ashworth. Every head turned, every fan stilled. Genevieve felt 1,000 eyes on her, and her knees threatened to buckle. Arthur's hand at her back, firm and warm, was the only thing holding her upright. "Head high, my love," he whispered, the endearment a calculated performance. "You are not here to be judged. You are here to be admired." She was, as he had requested, a vision in flame. Madame Delacroix had worked a miracle, creating a gown of deep, burning copper silk that shimmered with every step. The Ashworth diamonds, heavy and cold, encircled her throat and glittered in her upswept golden hair. She was not Lady Genevieve, the ward. She was the Duchess of Ashworth, a formidable, untouchable creature. They descended the grand staircase, Arthur smiling and nodding, as if this were the most normal thing in the world, as if he hadn't just married a fugitive in a secret, pre-dawn ceremony. The whispers started instantly. "Thought she'd disappeared. Abducted, I heard. Special license. My dear, how scandalous. Looks positively radiant. He looks smitten." They were swarmed. Ladies of the ton, who just 2 days ago would have cut her dead, now rushed to congratulate them, their eyes sharp with barely concealed curiosity. "Your Grace, what a surprise," chirped Lady Cowper. "We had no idea you were even courting." "It was a whirlwind, Lady Cowper," Arthur said, his smile devastatingly charming. He lifted Genevieve's hand to his lips, his eyes never leaving hers. "When you know, you know. I could not risk losing her." The ton lapped it up. A whirlwind romance. The cold, untouchable Duke of Ashworth swept off his feet. It was better than any gossip they could have invented. And then the sea of people parted. Lord Harrington stood before them. He was immaculate in black, a single blood-red ruby in his cravat. His face was a mask of polite inquiry, but his eyes were black with a rage so potent Genevieve could feel the heat of it. "Ashworth," he said, his voice a smooth, dangerous purr. "And Lady Genevieve. Or should I say, Duchess?" "Harrington," Arthur replied, his tone frosty. "I'm surprised to see you. I would have thought you'd be busy. Searching the city gates. I heard my fiancée had caused quite a stir by taking an impromptu evening ride. She is so adventurous." Harrington's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Indeed. An adventure. How charming. You must tell me, Duchess, how did you manage to evade your own household? There was a rather common dress found in your chambers. We all feared the worst." This was the moment. Genevieve put her hand on Arthur's arm, a gesture of wifely affection that was also a silent plea for him to let her handle this. She looked directly at Harrington, her gaze as cold and sharp as the diamonds at her throat. "My lord, you mistake a lady's whim for a crisis. I was bored. The ball was dull. I borrowed a maid's outfit for a lark, a silly, childish game. I intended to give my attendants a fright." She laughed, a light, airy sound that belied the ice in her veins. "But I fear I took it too far, lost my way in the city, and was hopelessly lost. And then, like a knight from a storybook, My dear Arthur found me." She gazed up at Arthur, her eyes shining with practiced adoration. He was so furious at my foolishness, he insisted we marry at once. He said he would not let me out of his sight again. So terribly possessive. What is a girl to do? Harrington's face had gone pale. He could not call her a liar. Not here. Not when she was wrapped in the Ashworth name and diamonds, with her besotted, powerful new husband at her side. To do so would be to accuse a duke of lying, an offence that could lead to a duel. He was trapped. "A lark," he repeated, his voice strained. "How very amusing. You must forgive the king's concern, Duchess. We were all quite frantic." "You are forgiven, Lord Harrington," Arthur said, his voice booming with false geniality. "Now, if you'll excuse us, I believe this is my wife's waltz." He swept her onto the dance floor, leaving Harrington standing alone, his fists clenched, a subject of sudden, intense speculation. As Arthur took her in his arms, the music swelled. They moved together perfectly, as they always had, years ago in secret. "Well done," he murmured into her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "You played that magnificently." "I was terrified," she whispered back, her hand trembling on his shoulder. "I know. But you were brilliant." They danced, the ballroom blurring around them. For a few stolen moments, it wasn't a performance, it was just them. The world and its dangers faded, and there was only the music, and the solid, safe circle of his arms. But as the waltz ended, Arthur's expression grew serious again. "That was part one," he said, guiding her toward the terrace. "He is off balance. Now we must strike. We need the ledger." "But how? The palace is where we are going. Now." "Now? In the middle of the ball?" "It's the perfect cover. Harrington is here. He cannot be in two places at once. He thinks he has been thwarted by a marriage. He does not yet know he is being hunted for treason. I have a carriage waiting at the side entrance. Hobbs is with it. He has a key to the palace service tunnels. You thought of everything." "I try." He paused, looking at her, the copper of her dress and the diamonds in her hair illuminated by the moonlight. "Genevieve, this is dangerous. Far more dangerous than anything yet. Once we have that book, there is no turning back. We will be accusing a man who has the king's trust. He framed my father," she said, her voice hard. "He threatened me. He is a traitor. I am not the girl you knew, Arthur. I am not afraid." He smiled, a true, rare smile that lit up his face. "No," he said, "you are not. You are the Duchess of Ashworth. Now let's go reclaim your father's name." St. James's Palace was a sleeping giant. The main halls were dark, the ball long over. But Arthur and Genevieve were not in the main halls. They were in the damp, cold, and narrow passages behind the walls, the same ones Genevieve had used to flee. This time, however, she was not running from her life. She was running toward it. Hobbs led the way, a small, shielded lantern held aloft. "This way, Your Grace. Her former chambers are in this wing." They moved like ghosts, their fine evening clothes a stark contrast to the grime and shadows. They emerged from a hidden panel behind a tapestry, stepping into the familiar, opulent corridor that led to her old rooms. "The guards," she whispered. "Drugged," Arthur replied. "Hobbs had a conversation with the new kitchen maid. A few drops of laudanum in their nightly wine. They will sleep soundly till dawn." They reached her door. It was unlocked. Harrington's men had already been here. The room was a disaster. Her furniture was overturned, the upholstery slashed, her personal effects scattered and broken. He had been here. He had been looking. "He was furious," Genevieve murmured, a chill running down her spine. "But he didn't find it," Arthur said. "Where?" She walked past the destroyed canopy bed, past her smashed writing desk. She went to the grand marble fireplace. She reached deep inside, her arm scraping against the soot-lined stone, to a loose brick high in the chimney wall. Her fingers fumbled, then closed around the oilskin-wrapped package. She pulled it out, her copper dress now smeared with soot. She held it in her hands. The small, black ledger. The sum of her father's life, and the proof of Harrington's crimes. "Got it," she breathed, a wave of relief so profound it made her dizzy. "I knew you were clever," a voice said from the doorway. They spun around. Lord Harrington stood there, a pistol in his hand, aimed directly at Arthur's heart. Behind him stood 2 of his own men, armed and looking ruthless. "But not clever enough," Harrington sneered. "Did you really think I wouldn't leave a watch? My men saw you leave the ball. I followed. A romantic, late-night ride?" "Harrington," Arthur said, his voice calm. He stepped slightly in front of Genevieve. "It's over. Put the gun down." "Over?" Harrington laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Oh, it is over, Ashworth. But not for me. Give me the book, Genevieve, or your new husband pays the price. A tragic, post-nuptial accident. A duke found shot in the chambers of his runaway bride. The Ton will talk about it for weeks." "Don't give it to him, Genevieve," Arthur commanded, his eyes locked on Harrington. "A brave, foolish sentiment," Harrington mocked. "Now the book, or he dies." Genevieve looked at the book in her hands. She looked at Arthur, so calm, so brave, standing ready to die for her. She looked at Harrington, his face a mask of triumphant greed. "You are right, my lord," Genevieve said, her voice trembling. "You win." She stepped out from behind Arthur. "Genevieve, no!" Arthur yelled. "Silence!" Harrington barked, his pistol unwavering. "You win," she repeated, holding the book out. "It's yours. Just let him go." She walked slowly toward Harrington, her eyes downcast. He smiled, his thin lips pulling back from his teeth. "Wise choice, my dear. Perhaps I should have married you, after all. You learn." She was 5 feet from him, then 3, then 1. He reached out his free hand to snatch the book. As his fingers brushed the oilskin, Genevieve moved. In one fluid motion, she dropped the book and drove her knee with all her force into Harrington's groin. He roared, a gurgling, inhuman sound, and his pistol discharged, the bullet exploding into the ceiling plaster as his hand spasmed. At the exact same instant, the door to the corridor burst open. "Now!" Arthur bellowed. The room was filled with men. Not Harrington's men, not palace guards, but Arthur's men. Hobbs was at their lead, and they were all armed. Harrington's 2 thugs were subdued in seconds. Harrington himself was on his knees, clutching himself, whimpering. Genevieve stood over him, breathing heavily, her heart hammering. Arthur rushed to her, his hands checking her for injury. "Are you hurt? My God, Genevieve, that was the most reckless, idiotic, brilliant thing I have ever seen." "You knew he was here?" she panted. "I suspected he would leave a tail," Arthur said, pulling her close. "Hobbs and my men followed us, staying in the shadows. I was waiting for the signal." Genevieve picked up the ledger from the floor. She walked over to the whimpering Lord Harrington and held it just out of his reach. "This," she said, her voice like ice, "is my father's name. You will never touch it." The main doors of the chamber burst open again. This time it was the royal guard, and behind them, looking furious and confused, was the king himself. "What is the meaning of this?" he boomed. "Ashworth, Harrington, an attack in my palace." "Your Majesty," Arthur said, bowing low and pulling Genevieve with him. "Forgive the intrusion. We have, tonight, uncovered a viper in your midst." "Lies!" Harrington spat from the floor. They attacked me. They are the traitors." "The proof, Your Majesty," Genevieve said, stepping forward. She ignored Harrington and presented the small, black ledger to the king. "Is all here. Lord Harrington has been stealing from you for a decade. He framed my father, the Earl of Northwood, to cover his tracks. He is a traitor to the crown." The king took the book. His private secretary, a new man, not Lord Pembroke, opened it. The king's face grew darker and darker as he read. "Lord Pembroke," the king murmured. "Was Harrington's accomplice, Your Majesty," Arthur supplied. "He intercepted my letters to your ward. He fed you lies to keep them apart, to protect his co-conspirator." The king looked from the book to the pathetic, defeated man on the floor. His face was a mask of thunder. "Guards," the king ordered, his voice deadly quiet. "Arrest Lord Harrington. Arrest Lord Pembroke. Seize their estates. I want every shilling he stole returned to the treasury. Every last shilling." As Harrington was dragged away, still protesting his innocence, the king looked at Genevieve. "Lady No Duchess," he said, "it seems I and the crown owe you and your father an apology." "His name, Your Majesty," Genevieve said, her voice thick with emotion. "That is all I ask. Clear my father's name." "It shall be done," the king said, proclaimed publicly, "his lands and titles restored to you." He looked at them both, a flicker of a smile on his face. "You two have caused more chaos in one night than my entire court has in a year. A runaway bride, a secret marriage, a palace coup, and all, it seems, for love." Arthur stepped to Genevieve's side, taking her hand. This time it was not a performance. "Not just for love, Your Majesty," Arthur said, "though there is that. But for honor." The king nodded. "Go, it is almost dawn. The Duke and Duchess of Ashworth have earned their rest." They walked out of the palace, not through the service tunnels, but through the grand front gates. The first light of dawn was painting the sky in shades of rose and violet. The London air was cool and clean. They stood on the steps, free. "So," Genevieve said, looking at the man who was her husband, "a marriage of necessity." "An alliance," he agreed, his eyes searching hers. "To stop a traitor. And to save a father's reputation," he added. A silence fell, but this one was not cold or awkward. It was full of possibility. "The lie," she said quietly. "At the ball. It didn't feel entirely like a lie, Arthur. When you said you couldn't risk losing me." He turned to her, taking both her hands. The soot on her dress and the diamonds in her hair seemed to capture the first rays of the sun. "Genevieve," he said, his voice rough. "It was never a lie. Not 5 years ago, and not last night. I have loved you since I was a boy. I was just a fool. It took you fleeing a palace in a servant's dress for me to finally see it, to finally see you. And you recognized me," she whispered. "Instantly," he confirmed, "always. How could I not recognize my own heart?" He leaned in, and this time, in the full light of the new day, he kissed his wife. It was not a brand or a promise. It was a homecoming. And so the servant's dress is put away, but the courage it took to wear it remains. Lady Genevieve and the Duke of Ashworth proved that true recognition isn't just about a face, but about seeing the honor, courage, and love hidden in someone's heart. They faced down traitors and reclaimed their honor, all because he knew her, even when the rest of the world looked right through her. What did you think of Genevieve's daring escape and Arthur's unwavering recognition? If you love dramatic historical romance and stories where love truly conquers all, then please let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video. If you were on the edge of your seat, share it with a friend who loves a good scandal, and subscribe for more tales of love, danger, and redemption. Thank you for listening.